Our topic for today is finding your executive presence. And I have my guest, Joanna. Joanna, welcome. Just want to give you a big background around Joanna. Joanna Herrick has an 18-year history of leading the sales and operational growth of a technology driven business, spanning the industry of retail, apparel production, e commerce, and technology consulting. Joanna started her journey in 2006 with a privately owned luxury retail and custom clothier based in Portland, Oregon, where she gained full business management exposure, including customer service, sales, bookkeeping, purchasing, contract negotiation, and employee management. In 2013, Joanna moved to Chicago to join the locally based retailer, Trunk Club, where she spent 7 years building the custom clothing operation team, including apparel design and production, and internal sales and enablement and support. Joanna followed experience at Trunk Club by leading a national sales and retail operation team of 105 people at the Block Tux before taking on the Chief Operating Officer role at Grammartier, a technology platform helping to drive sales and operation for personal shoppers and stylists. In October 2021, Joanna decided to make an industry shift, moving her experience supporting hypergrowth business to the investment management industry by joining Torrent Blanc as Chief Growth Officer. Joanna oversees sales, sales operations, strategy, execution, with an internal mandate of growth and expansion while delivering on the company mission of offering the highest quality operational and technology expertise to the global investment industry. Welcome, Joanna.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Let's do the first question. Can you share a bit about your career journey?
Yes, my career journey has been anything from a straight line. I began in my college degree and in my 20s in the performing arts, which is obviously very different from where I landed today. But it left me with a couple really strong tools that I've used throughout my career. One is performing makes it easy for me to be in front of teams and in front of audiences and feeling confident with that environment. But more importantly, when you're in the performing arts, you are solely responsible for knowing how you learn and how to teach yourself. And you are completely reliant on yourself to make yourself better week after week. And so I've been able to apply that throughout my career, especially in industry pivots and things like that, where it's on me to know what I don't know and learn what I need to learn in order to be successful. So I've carried those forward with me throughout my career. Then I made a pivot into retail and sales operations, as you spoke about quite a bit, and spent just under 2 decades there. That was a fun and exciting journey. I, especially at Trunk Club, had the opportunity to go through a merger and acquisition with Nordstrom, which is obviously a huge and very reputable company. And having a national team under me that I had to guide through that M&A was an amazing leadership experience. It was that's a great way to cut your teeth in leadership, is leading a team through an M&A. So that was a really, really wonderful experience that I am fortunate to have been a part of. And moving over to the Black Tux allowed me to combine my operations and sales experience and leadership into one role, worked for wonderful people there, and really got the experience to grow multiple layers of leadership around me. And fortunate that I had fantastic people on my team that capable of pushing me right out of my seat. And I moved over to Garmentier, where I was the chief operating officer for a technology platform enabling personal shoppers and stylists to run their own businesses. And then I made my pivot to where I am now, which is Torrent Blanc. We are a business and technology consulting firm specifically for the investment management industry, and serve clients globally. and I oversee the growth of the business, which has 3 different arms, if you will, to it. So I ensure that we have the operational infrastructure to support our growth plan. I oversee the growth plan itself and make sure that we have the sales pipeline in place to achieve those goals. And then I also ensure that we have the talent pipeline to support the clients that we take on with our sales growth strategies. So that's what I do today, and it's been a great journey.
Well, thank you for sharing a very diverse background and the way you pivot from one opportunity to another one, and how you actually have grown yourselves. Very impressive. This section, I want to do a shout out. I want to shout out to Sharon Doherty. She's to be the district director at Toastmaster that I work with. I volunteer for many years, and I really enjoy working with her and learning a lot from her. Who do you want to shout out to today?
My shout out is to a former leader of mine. I reported at Trunk Club to a gentleman named Michael Barkin, and he dramatically shifted my leadership style. And to this day, I implement so much of what I experienced from him. A couple very quick examples, if you'll indulge me.
Yeah. Yes.
I remember the first time I made a really big mistake for our business, and I went into him. I knew I had to own it, and I was nervous, and I went into his office, and he was so calm and so composed, and he looked me in the eye and he said, "Did you make the best decision you knew how to make with the information that you had?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "Okay, then let's fix it." And it was just this moment where I thought, oh my gosh, he has my back. He trusts me. He's going to help me work through this. And I thought, I want to make sure that everyone on my team always feels this from me. It was such a powerful
Wow.
moment from a leadership perspective. It probably seemed like a small thing to him, but it really shifted the way I approached my team in a difficult moment. And we're going to talk about that concept a little bit more later. But anyways, thank you, Michael. I still use some of your tactics today.
Thank you for sharing that. That's very inspiring. And what a great leader, too. And also mold you to be a great leader that you are today. Let's
Yeah.
dive into the topic. What is executive presence and why it is crucial for professionals, especially those in leadership role?
Yeah. So I actually like to try and separate the concept of being in a leadership role and executive presence because I believe very strongly that you can be a leader and exude executive presence way before you have the title. And I would go further to say you're more likely to eventually achieve the title if you are exuding executive presence and leadership skills before you're given that. So I very much encourage starting to build these skills early in your career in any role you're in, even if you're in an entry level position. The earlier that you start to demonstrate some of these skills, the better. From an import standpoint, you'll read many different articles. You'll find a lot of different metrics on this, but anywhere from a tenth of a second to 11 seconds before people start to subconsciously form an opinion about you. So that's more likely before you've even had a chance to speak or demonstrate your knowledge or your subject matter expertise. They've already started to assess you. And some of the characteristics that people commonly start to, and again, this is subconscious, we all do it to each other, but people start to evaluate your likability, your trustworthiness, and your competence in that very short period of time. And obviously, all 3 of those qualities are vital to your work success.
Mhm.
So these come down to as simple things of how you carry yourself, how you dress, how do you introduce yourself? Do you have a good handshake? Do you look people in the eye? Those are things that do make a difference right up front, even before you've started to show what you know and what you can do.
I love that you separate leadership and executive presence, right? I think I love the way you did an overlay on that one. So thank you for sharing your thoughts on it. Can you now share some of the key elements or characteristics of strong executive presence? Because I felt that's really important to peel down on that one.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are a lot of fantastic people out there that speak on this subject. There are a lot of great articles. You can go to Google and Google executive presence, and you'll see these things like the 4 pillars of executive presence or the 7 C's of executive presence. But as you read, as you hear different people talk, I find that there are 2 things that are very consistent with any presentation or thought leadership around this topic. And one, of course, comes down to communication. And the other comes down to something a little more intangible. People use the word presence or gravitas or influence. But it's sort of that je ne sais quoi that people wonder, how does that person have that? Why do I feel like that when that person walks in the room, right? That's the one that's a little harder to define. But to break down communication first, there are a few pieces to communication that I found are really important. One is being as clear as possible. And I think about 2 elements to this. One is being concise, learning how to cut out unnecessary words. This is true in email or verbal. The more concise you can be, the less room you leave for misinterpretation. And the second element would be to just be very thoughtful about the words that you do choose. Are you using the most accurate words that you have for what you're trying to say? Taking a step back, if you have the opportunity, taking a step back to say, okay, is there any way that someone could misinterpret the way I've said this or the words that I'm using right now? Sometimes in business that can cause a real problem when 2 people think they've spoken and they think they understood each other and they get 2 different results, right? So
Happen all the
have
time.
you been concise and clear about what you're trying to communicate? The second piece to this is composure. It's so important as a leader or as someone trying to demonstrate leadership skills, again, if you don't have the title yet, to be really calm and composed with how you communicate. And this is very easy when things are going well. It's not as easy when things are
Yes.
not going well. I admit that I have gone to a bathroom and shut the door and had my moment for a minute of freak out, but then you open the door and you pull yourself together and you walk out, and your team needs to know that somebody is in control and somebody is knowing that this is going to be okay. We're going to solve it and we're going to move forward together. So from a communication standpoint, that's really important. And then the presence, kind of the gravitas that everyone's trying to figure out, how do you get that? I feel comes when you start to learn how to pull all these elements together that we're talking about. If you carry yourself well, if you've dressed appropriately and professionally, if you know how to introduce yourself to someone, you know how to speak calmly and clearly and concisely and in different environments at different situations. Do you have the adaptability to change the way that you present and speak yourself depending on who your audience is and what they need from you? When you start to be able to combine all of those skills together, that kind of presence starts to come out and surface and develop on its own. So I think that piece that feels intangible, when you start to apply all of these small tricks that we're talking about and pull them all together, that's when you'll start to naturally exude that extra presence.
Well, thank you for emphasizing the importance of communication, because sometimes people, when I talk to people about executive presence, they talk about the image, right? And you did it the opposite way. You said build from within, like, communication first, composure extremely important. And like you said,
Yes,
there should be a moment for you to also be freaked out on your own and then come out and
sure.
show your team, I could lead you to where I need to be. And really, I love
Yes,
the way you said, if you master communication, you master composure, or you had a handle of composure, and then the rest would just come together, right? I think I love the way you, that's how I envisioned when you were explaining one by one how it comes together. So thank you for it. It's a lot clearer to me now. My next question is, how can individuals develop and enhance their executive presence, especially if they're new to leadership roles? It's kind of tricky when you're new.
It is tricky, and this is why I think it's so important to start building these skills from the very beginning of your career. And we all know that it's very common for people to be promoted from within, which is
Yeah.
excellent, right? It's always wonderful when someone inside your team can rise to that next level and take on a new challenge. Um, but if you haven't already been demonstrating these leadership skills, especially if you're getting promoted within your own team,
Mm.
it's really hard to get team adoption if they're not already viewing you as a leader. And I
Mm.
think we've all experienced that feeling about someone on our team that kind of just shines, right? And they already do this for their team without having the title, and make that be you. You know, you can be that person. Um, so there's a big learning curve when you get promoted, especially to your first team leadership role. There's so much to learn. You're going to stub your toe a million times. So if you've already started to flex these muscles in your day-to-day job, that's really important. I think in terms of how to build those, I love that you started with the shout outs, because nothing, in my opinion, can be more important than having someone to emulate. Unfortunately, we don't always get to work under leaders that we want to um, emulate. So hopefully you get that opportunity. But if not, pay attention and seek out the people outside of your vertical or your business unit where you work. If you notice a great leader in another business vertical, reach out to them, ask them to have coffee, get more exposure, and just start asking questions. If you're a truly great leader, and I'm going to mention this later too, there's less ego. Most people are really happy to help you, and they really respect someone that's reaching out for that kind of exposure and advice. So the more that you can proactively expose yourself to great leaders and find things like I mentioned at the beginning with my shout out that I want to copy, that's how you start to flex these muscles for the first time and build them and make and get them into your own bones, you know.
I like that you talk about having an initiative to find great leaders to emulate, right? Or finding mentors. I think that's really important in developing yourself. So thank you for highlighting that one. My next question is, in your experience, what does communication play in building and maintaining executive presence?
Yeah, so I touched on this a little bit, but I consider communication to be one of the most vital components of executive presence. It is ultimately, nobody can read your mind. So the people around you that you're speaking to, whether it's your own team, whether it's other leaders, whether you're needing to manage up and get people with titles above you to agree with, or you're trying to influence what you need for your team from them, those communication skills are always so important. And um, I did allude to this earlier as well, but making your communication a little bit adaptable is a great leadership style. And taking a minute to say, who is my audience right now? What do they need? Right? Because when you're a leader is a servant role. A leader is a servant
Yes,
role.
yes.
So you are helping and supporting other people when you're in a leadership position. So what is it that they need from you right now? And how do you adapt your communication to make sure that they are getting what they need? So I think being really having a very high EQ in those moments and making sure that you're taking into consideration your audience first before you check your ego. It's not about you as a leader, it's about them. So making sure that you're considering them before yourself and how you're communicating will really help with the delivery. And the clear, the concise, the calm, the emotional regulation, under pressure. Under pressure is really where leadership skills get tested. It's really
Yes.
easy to lead when everything's going great.
Very true. Absolutely true. I think next question I have, I think it's quite interesting to really index on communication, calmness, and putting things together. But then I want to think about when are there any common mistakes or misconception about executive presence, and how can those be addressed?
Yeah, so I alluded to this in my last answer, but I think a very common mistake, I guess if you want to call it, or misconception is there is a common perception of a marriage between leadership and power. And
Mm,
with that comes ego and arrogance. You will very rarely find people that are seeking out and choosing their leadership mentors as the people who are extremely arrogant and egocentric. It's really important to separate confidence from ego, because in
yeah,
order to have executive presence, you have to exude confidence, right? Because
yeah,
for example, going back to a tough situation with your team or a merger and acquisition, right? A merger and acquisition is very scary. There's a lot of transition. People don't know if they're going to lose their jobs. Everything's changing. Change is so hard, right? So when you think about that, you have to, if you're the leader in that situation, you have to exude confidence, because your team
mm,
needs to know that someone's in control. And if you feel okay about it, they feel okay about it. There's a huge difference between confidence and ego. So really checking that at the door. Um, you know, I don't care where you are in your career.
yeah,
Everyone can continue to improve their communication skills. It is a
mm,
forever journey. So you never know everything. Um, Knowing what you don't know is so important. And by the way, you don't have to know everything. Just being
mm,
comfortable with what you don't know there's so much power in that. Know what you don't know, be comfortable with it, assess, am I supposed to know it? Do I need to know it? Okay, well, if that's the case, then it's on you to go learn it. But there's also things that you don't actually have to know to be a great
mm.
leader. You can surround yourself with people that do know that and be really comfortable with the fact that you've got people next to you who are better than you at something. So separating that confidence and ego is really important when it comes to executive presence, I think.
Thank you for highlighting the how we separate confidence and ego. Right, I think that's very valuable. Next question is, how can executive presence be leveraged in different professional settings, such as meeting, presentation, or maybe networking event?
Yeah. So, again, I'm going to go back to adaptability to different environments. And for example, if you're giving a keynote speech versus if you're talking to your team about something that didn't go well this week versus if you're at a networking event, I personally am going to let different sides of my personality come out. I'm going to
Mm,
dress differently. I'm going to speak about different things. So, really assessing who that audience is and what they need and are looking from you in that moment, and being adapted to that is really important. Um, so, for example, you mentioned a networking event. Even within that, if you are going to a networking event with a group that you're very familiar with and you all meet every month,
mm,
then I'm going to have a different part of my personality, or maybe more
mm,
openness come out. I may dress in a way that's a little bit more still businessy, but maybe fun and friendly. But if I'm going into an environment that I've never been in before, I don't really know that particular business culture, I may wear something that's a little bit more
mm.
traditional, be a little bit more formal with the way I initially introduce myself, until I've had the opportunity to evaluate what the culture is of the room that I'm in, and am I being adaptive to that. Um, so that the perception on the other side is that I make sense here. I belong in this
Yeah.
room, and I'm someone that these people want to talk to and want to network with. So being really perceptive and observant and adapting to the environment you're in.
Thank you. That people need to be adaptive in every situation they're in, right? And observant, I think, and adjusting to different situation. The next question I have is, can you share a success story? Example of someone who has significantly improved executive presence.
Yes. I love this story. I had a client, this goes back to when I was at Trunk Club. And I was supporting custom clothing operations at the time. And we had a client who came to us, and he was going through a lot of life transitions and wasn't feeling great about himself. He was trying to get a promotion. He'd gone through a divorce, just a lot of big life transition things. And he really wanted to figure out how to turn around where he was. He didn't quite know what to do. And so he just started with some really easy basics. And he came to Trunk Club looking for help with a different image. And I think this is really important. We've all heard the phrase, fake it till you make it. Sometimes that's well applied, sometimes it's not. But in this case, I think he really didn't know how to get where he was trying to go. And he just started with something simple. You know what? Let me just look the part. I don't know if I feel the part yet, but I'm at least going to look the part. So he came in, had us help him pull him together, and we got some great custom suits for him. And he turned around and looked in the mirror, and you could see all over his face that he saw what he was trying to get other people to see, and he saw it for the first time, and all of a sudden he stood a little taller, and it started to change how he perceived himself. And 6 months later he did get a promotion, and all of these things started to happen. He got remarried. He worked with us for years. He got remarried, but he really did transform himself. And I think it's starting with the little things, right? It can feel kind of big to try and take on all this at once. And so and it doesn't have to be your wardrobe that you start with, by the way. That was just an example here. But I think finding those little tangible nuggets of things that you hear, that you read, and just starting with those and put one notch in your belt at a time. And that's when I said at the beginning of this conversation, when you are trying to get that gravitas, that executive presence, it's the culmination of all these little tactics that we're talking about that eventually bring you to that place. So just recognizing, okay, which bite does it feel doable to take off right now? Which bite can I do? What can I chew on right now? And start to knock off those things, and you will start to build that from within.
Well, thank you for sharing that life-transforming, amazing story. I think it's very heartwarming to see. I always love success story, but it's just really it makes you feel good. You form a part of it, right? Like you're part of that journey that make them become who they are in many ways, right? Whether we want to acknowledge of that tiny act of kindness of helping him, and he was able to gain that confidence, and it totally transformed and changed his life. Wow. Thank you for sharing that story. We're still talking executive presence, and I'm thinking about, are there any resources that you use, books, trainings that you use to actually help you get to where you are today?
So we've mentioned it a little bit during this discussion, but for me personally, I have found from a leadership perspective, the absolute number one resource I've had is other people. So you can certainly read a lot about executive presence and about leadership, but there is nothing like experiencing it. There's nothing like talking to someone else who's had to learn it and do it. You will not talk to a leader out there who has not fallen down and stubbed their toe and failed. And it can really help you feel confident to keep working on this when you know that the people that you respect and that what you try to emulate have gone through this process too. So I would just say, building that that group of mentors around you and finding the people that you're trying to emulate. And by the way, I have taken leadership skills from people that report to me. And this is why I say you
Wow,
can
impressive.
build leadership skills at any time. I can list off a few people for you that worked for me over the years that I still do something that I witnessed them do to someone else on our team. And I thought, that's great. I'm stealing that one. So the people that you are learning to emulate don't have to have a VP or C-suite title. They can just be someone you witness showing leadership skills. And if you see a nugget, grab it, put it in your toolbox.
I love that you share that. It really exemplify what a true leader is. A true leader learn from people that they work or report to, or people that work with them. Right? I think that's really amazing how you're humble enough to admit that you did that, which is great. Right? It's a hallmark of a great leader. So kudos to you. Kudos.
Thank you.
Next, I want to ask you. We've been talking about presence, and I want maybe my audience to have three takeaway. Do you have a three takeaway that you want them to remember from today's episode? What would those be?
Yeah. So number one, I said it multiple times, start early. You can be a leader
Yeah.
from day one. On your first job out of college, you can be a leader on your team. Leadership does not come with a title. It is a group of behaviors that you show. So start early, and the earlier you start to work on these skills, the earlier you will start to see that growth in your career, because it will be recognized by the people around you. Number two, know what you don't know. This is so important. You're more of a danger to yourself when you don't know what you don't know. So really developing that self-awareness. And some of that comes from really proactively asking for feedback. People are a little bit scared about feedback. It is your best friend. And that guy I just gave this shout out to at the beginning, Michael Barkin, that's his line. I stole it. But it's true. Feedback really is your best friend, even when it's something you don't want to hear. But knowing what you don't know and which of those things you need to work on and which of those things you just need to surround yourself with is really powerful. And then the third piece is always, no matter, even if you're a C-suite executive, you still have to surround yourself with other people that you respect and admire and are trying to emulate and continue learning from them at all times. So always looking for that. You hear those phrases about who's your personal board of directors or whatever. There's different terms for it, but building that group of people around you that are going to make you better is really key.
Thank you for sharing that takeaway. I think really great for my audience to learn that. Now, before we end the segment, I think can you share a little bit of the work that you're doing now? How people could reach you? Are there any projects that you're working on? Any speaking engagement?
I just had one last week.
I know. I saw
And
that on
now you.
LinkedIn.
I don't have it. Yes. So again, I'm at Torrent Blanc. We are a business and technology consulting firm, and we are. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to, or I don't know if will you share those links out, but anyone
I
is
would add
willing to
it to my
connect with.
episode. I would add it to my
Okay,
episode.
great, wonderful, yeah. So anyone is always welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always looking to build my own network as well. And if you are interested in just having a conversation about this topic, I am always open to that too. Will can share out my email address as well. But I'm happy for someone to email, ask me for 30 minutes or a coffee. I'm always happy to do something like that and have one-on-one conversation about these topics.
Joanna, thank you for being in my podcast today. Having my audience learn, finding your executive presence. I truly appreciate your time with us today. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Thank you for having me.